Everybody traveled safe. Everybody's doing well. I'm ready when you are.
Yeah, just can you give us an update on where you all are at in your off-season preparation? Getting ready for the draft.
Yeah, well, this is we're excited to be here at the Combine, and this is an important exposure. We went through a very productive round of February meetings, so we're able to set the board based off the film, and now we get into this part of the process. And I know different people see the Combine different ways, but this is a very important exposure for us. Any touch point with the players that we can have is critical. The interviews, the formals, the informals, seeing them work out and compete, and just being here with all our peers, agents. If you handle this week the right way, it can be very productive. So we're excited about being here.
There's still some value in the measurables, the testing, and I guess the workouts and everything. How do you kind of coalesce all that and to get that to be a beneficial operation for the franchise?
Yeah, well, the most important thing is the makeup. We're here working to build a championship roster one player at a time, and to build a championship roster, you have to have championship makeup, and you have to have the right kind of culture. And so assessing the makeup and assessing the character, making sure the players fit our ethos, smart, tough, highly competitive players, that's always going to be number one in what we do. Everything else matters. The tape obviously matters, and what kind of football players they are and their talent level. And, yes, the measurables and the statistics and all those things matter. It's all a part of the equation, but number one is always going to be the makeup. Yeah, well, the elephant in the room, right? We have some big numbers associated with four players, particularly our quarterback. We have a big cap number, and all those players with the big cap numbers, it's not their fault. They're just good professionals that come in and do their job, and I want to be clear with that. But it is a challenge. It's not I wouldn't say it's a problem. I would say it's a challenge and something we have to work around. So it's important to make sure we go through the process of finding the right ways to open up some cap space, and we have to add players and we have to improve this roster. That's important. And when you're at different points, there are times where you'll handle the salary cap and handle contracts a different way. Some teams feel like they're one player away and they're going to make a big splash in free agency and spend a lot of money. We're not at that point. We have to be patient. We have to be patient. We have to be selective, and we have to be cost effective. So where we are with our team, we have to figure out the right ways to create cap space, and then make sure we're patient and we find value.
So in terms of maybe in general on philosophy, what are some ways to approach that?
Well, there are a lot of different ways, whether you're talking about contract extensions, whether you're talking about there are going to be cuts, there are going to be trades, there are going to be contracts that we do convert. And we don't. I think another elephant in the room is: are we rebuilding? Are we trying to win now? And I would say we're trying to have our cake and eat it too. We want to be smart, and we don't want to make decisions that are going to hurt us in future years. But we also want to build the best team that we can. So we're going to work hard to be smart and calculate in our decision making. But we also have to improve this roster this offseason and add competition.
Terry, there's obviously a lot going on in the league right now with regard to hiring, diversity, inclusion, coaching, executive ranks. Rogers made it clear that the league has to do a better job. Do you see areas where you think over the last couple of cycles that things have been pointing to where the league is doing a better job?
Well, I think the seat I sit in, I'm a general manager. I'm one of the 32. So what I have to do is look in the mirror and look at what we're doing in Atlanta. I can focus on that area, what we're doing in Atlanta, to help this part of the process. And so I have to make sure that, number one, which is whether we're talking about people in the person in doing that, and then also the pipeline. Every time you're bringing in people, whether you're bringing in coaches, scouts, or any area of the organization, make sure you're bringing in minorities, and everyone has opportunities to get in your organization and then grow. So for me personally, I just look in the mirror and make sure that we're doing the right things here in Atlanta.
But isn't that a real logical way to approach this? If every team looks in the mirror, wouldn't that go a long way to improving this overall situation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. And look, the league is going to look at the situation every year, and I know the league is trying their best to improve in the areas that they can. But I think for me, I can't solve we can't solve the problem for every single team, but we can look in the mirror and do the best we can for the Atlanta Falcons. Well, we look for succession plans at every position. We have to add to the roster at every single position. And I think where you can get in trouble is if you reach and you feel desperate in certain areas. But we're not going to do that. And yet we're going to evaluate. We actually had formal interviews with several quarterbacks yesterday, and there's a good group in this draft. There's different flavors, and so we're going to evaluate those players. And at the appropriate time, we will add to that position. But I think you can get yourself in trouble if you reach and you don't feel good about what you're doing. I'm not going to say anything about any particular players or any, because if I answer that question, we can go through the entire roster and talk about who they are. But I would say we're going to look to add to every position and try to improve this roster. Well, I would say if you go through each position in the draft, there are some positions where they can be a little more top heavy, and it's not as strong midway through the draft. And there's some positions that there may not be a player at 8 that we love, but yet we know there's depth in the draft. So we're still going through that process, and I wouldn't say where we see the strengths and weaknesses, but I would say they're good players at every position. The wide receivers. There's some. We met with a lot of those guys last night too, and there's some real good receivers in the draft. Again, some different flavors depending on what you're looking for, and there's value at the top and throughout the draft at receiver. I'm glad you got the question in because you've gotten interrupted like 4 times, man. You're persistent. So Kyle Smith's a stud. It's funny when people ask about Kyle Smith, I always show them my phone because I get texts from him or calls every night about 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock, and he's watching film and he wants to talk through something, and he just doesn't stop. This is all he does. All he cares about is football and building a good team. His mind's always going. That's the way he's wired. So he's a stud. He's a really hard worker, and he's just obsessed with what he does. Well, I think at that position, when you go historically and look at edge rushers that have been successful, they've come in all shapes and sizes. You've had the tall, long, you've had the undersized, and you've had guys with great 40 times, guys that don't have great measurables. They come in all shapes and sizes, and so it's just about assessing, can that player get to the quarterback, and is he a true pressure player? Does he win? Because when you start focusing on just the measurables and you try to create something, sometimes you can get yourself in trouble. So I would say the most important part is he winning those one-on-one matchups? It's not something we can talk about right now. There's no update on it, and when there is, we'll let you know. It's great. Matt, he's a great professional, and he works from my vantage point, from my standpoint. I really appreciate Matt and what he's been in terms of a leader, in terms of a worker, in terms of professional, everything he's done here in Atlanta. And so I would say from my standpoint, from my vantage point, it's been excellent. I appreciate him. Yeah, that's exciting, and I've said it before. Obviously, Kirby and that whole staff, that whole building, they did a great job building what they've built there. And it is kind of overwhelming when you look at all the players on that roster, particularly on defense, but also on offense. They have some really good players, and there's so many local players from Georgia that are really good. I'm hoping we actually can have the local day. We weren't allowed to have it last year with COVID, but if we can have that, that's exciting because there's a lot of kids that grew up in the Georgia area that ended up in some different areas that are really good football players. So, but we're excited about spending a lot of time with those Georgia players. So you're asking if the Calvin Ridley situation.
Not just how he's doing, because a lot of you guys are just watching the types of teams that made the Super Bowl and how well they perform from the wide receiver position. If that does anything in terms of your evaluation as to what's going to be.
Got it. Got it. Well. Again, that's a question for Calvin. I can't address that, how he's particularly doing, but I will say, yes, the receiver position is important, but it's a complementary game. So our goal is to improve our team overall, because when you protect, when you have a good run game, then receivers are going to be more open. When you're playing good defense and you're playing with leads, it changes things. So I would say it's a complementary game. So our goal this offseason is to improve the entire roster. And obviously the receiver position, that's an area we have to improve as well. The value of being here at the Combine? Yeah, and it really starts with assessing the makeup. And we have to take advantage of every touch point we have with the players in this draft process, because the most important thing is the makeup. And so whether it's the Combine, whether it's pro days, personal visits, we have to take advantage of getting around those players, getting our hands on them, our coaches, our scouts, and make sure the players that we pull the cards off the board and the players we sign and bring into the building, we're bringing in the right culture and we're bringing in the right types of players. So it's extremely valuable. Last year, from being virtual, what did we learn? What did we learn from last year being virtual? I guess I can say we're still going to utilize as much as the league allows us to do in terms of virtual meetings, and we're going to utilize that, and we'll still utilize that part of it. You can be really efficient still having virtual meetings and virtual interviews as long as we're allowed to do that. So we'll utilize that. We did learn some things last year, but being in person is important as well. Thank you, ma'am.
Terry, the impact that Carroll had on your offense last year, it significant in a number of ways. You said that Atlanta feels like, is that near your top priorities list to get that?
Well, number one, when the first thing we have to do is create a little cap space, and then number one is our players, and we have a lot of players. I won't talk specifically about CP, but we have a lot of players that we want to re-sign, and that's important. Now, it's important for us you're never a player away, so we have to look at each specific player, evaluate the player, and look at the parameters of the types of contract that we can sign and what makes sense for us. And we have to stay disciplined with that, because we're not trying to sign one player, we're trying to build a team. So we have to make sure we assess the value and stay within our parameters with every player. And on the other side of it, it's important for players to assess their market value along with their agents and their families and find the best situation for them, because they have a small amount of time to make as much money as they can. And so we respect going through that process of the business. So with that, there are going to be some players that we're going to be able to resign. Some players are going to move on, and we understand that. But talking specifically about CP, that's an example of what we have to do this year in free agency. That was a situation where it was a month into free agency when we signed CP. He wasn't getting the offers he wanted, and again, a month into it, we signed him. We had a clear vision for him. It says a lot about him, the success that he had, because he's a great man. He's a great player. He added on and off the field. And it says a lot about our coaching staff, and that they were able to find what he does well, and he had the most productive season of his career as an offensive player. So that shows the way we were able to find value in that, and I believe it really shows the league that this is an attractive place to be. And you look at our coaching staff, and you look at what they're able to do with players, and you look at Atlanta and living in Atlanta, whether you're young and single or whether you're married, whether you have a big family, it's a great place to live. So living in Atlanta, the opportunities that we have in all three phases, because we have opportunities here, and we have a coaching staff that's going to get the most out of players. So I think CP is an example of what we have to do, especially with the constraints we have here this year. Yeah, because a lot of things we do when we evaluate value is we look at comps, position comps. And so when it is kind of that hybrid, unique position, it's tough to have a Rolodex of a lot of comps with players like that. So it's tough to value. But at the end of the day, for us, it boils down to assessing that makeup, assessing the fit, and looking at what we can do currently with our specific team. So it's not always easy to value that specific position, but it's something we have to do. Say it again. Yeah, yeah. Just like our whole rookie class and a lot of young players, it's important this offseason for them to work and come back in a better situation. But he did some really good things this year, and we're excited about him in the future.
Hey, Terry, a generic question about quarterbacks and hand size. There's been conversation this year about one of the prospects. As an evaluator, what does that mean to you?
Well, like I said, with any measurable, it's all a piece of the puzzle, right? It's all a part of it. Any measurable, any statistic, it's all a part of the evaluation. But there's never going to be one thing that makes the decision.
If a quarterback's got smaller hands, though, how does that factor into
It's all a part of it. It all factors in, but there's never going to be one thing that completely eliminates or makes a decision for us. But we're going to look at everything. Well, like I say, we do have those with every measurable, with every statistic. So it's things we look at, but the key is it's all that does is it makes that particular player or that particular whatever we're talking about. It can make them an exception in a certain category, but it's never going to make a decision. All right. Thank you. Thanks.
All right, D-Led.
Yeah, Coach, what are some of the things you all will be looking at? Coach said, Terry said they're trying to improve all of the positions. What's your kind of overarching theme as you're getting ready to watch players all week here?
Yeah, we're looking for anybody like most teams, and so we're trying to do our due diligence and making sure we know who every one of these players are. And for me, this is just the kind of beginning stages of the personnel evaluations. Obviously, our scouts and our personnel staff have been working on this class for several years.
Did you come into this season thinking that Fontenot Patterson was such a big part of the offense, such a dynamic player? Is that just some of the
Well, we had a few coaches that had worked with him in Chicago, had been with him, and Dave Ragone and Charles London had been with him in Chicago, and so his name obviously was up in free agency, and they kind of pitched to Terry and I, hey, this guy, we think he can do a little bit more. Some of the things we dabbled in Chicago, and so obviously, like I said, we're looking for help anywhere we can get it, and CP did a terrific job and embraced the role and took off from there. Yeah. I do. Yeah, no, I don't. I coach, terrific person, and he'll do a heck of a job. Sure. Yeah, I think you understand where your issues are. Obviously, when it deals with protection and you're involved in everything, you've got to orchestrate, get the play started. So Ben's got a great mind, great football mind, and I've never worked with him professionally, but I've known him for a long time, and I'm sure he'll do a great job in Detroit. We have a plan, D-Led, that we feel good about. Whether we have an offer out for him now or not, I mean, that's their prerogative, and that's what the rule's set up for, right? I mean, we do. Obviously, this is like for me, this is the first time. I mean, some of these guys we saw at the Senior Bowl, but as coaches, it's a good opportunity. We'll have our formal interviews, and we'll certainly have guys that we'll meet with at night, some of them in the morning. But so it's just beginning stages to get to know who these. Yeah, I know D-Led and these guys that. He is. Like all of our guys that are up for free agency, Russell did a terrific job. He got injured early in the season and came back. I thought he was really productive late in the year and helped us. Right. Yeah, you had to do it by Zoom. It's good to be back. I mean, it's good to be in person. I like being around people and getting to know them. Everybody's got different strategies. I mean, you'll see it throughout the league. It makes it fun. Some teams are here, some teams aren't from a coaching side. But personally, it helps me. I'd like to get to know them, and it's like the early stages of it. Get to put a name with a face and see who they are as people.
How do you evaluate makeup in this situation, in this scenario?
Yeah, I don't think you're going to make a snap judgment off a 18-minute speed dating meeting. But I think you look at their body of work, and again, it's just a part of the process. I've seen guys come in there and they light up the room, and they can fake it for 18, 20 minutes. I've seen other guys that, it's not their setting, and you got to look at their body of work. So it's just a small part of it.
For you, how do you go about evaluating guys who may have baggage or off the field issues, like sorting through that as compared to their talent level?
Well, I don't subscribe to a one-size-fits-all. I still believe in due process, and so you got to dig into it. And you don't take it, you may hear a story or somebody may have an agenda that they've talked to at the school, and again, you just try to look at somebody's body of work, and I'll give people the benefit of the doubt until they prove you wrong. And you just take it case by case.
Arthur, what have the scouts told you about the depth in the edge rusher group thus far?
Well, I saw some of them down at the Senior Bowl. Like every year, I don't subscribe. I mean, I know it's a great – the build-up to the drafts are great. I love the hot takes this time of year. There's always players. There's always good players at every position. There's somebody going to emerge, and a lot of us are going to look stupid because we passed up on so-and-so. So you do due diligence every year, and there's a good group of them.
Anything else?
All right. Guess that was pretty boring. Certainly, that's where Matt's at. I mean, obviously we just watched in our division. I mean, Tom played till he was maybe he'll still play. I don't know. He certainly didn't look his age, and Matt is a lot younger than Tom. And I understand there's only one Tom Brady, but you don't ever back yourself into a corner. Somebody gives you an offer you can't refuse. I mean, Matt knows how we feel about him, and I think Matt's got a lot of good football left in him. Well, I think every year. I don't think – certainly you look at the history of the draft, and that's at every position. So, you may feel good about your running back room or your receiver room, and somebody may fall that you think's a generational talent. Well, you ought to take them, or you make sure you do your due diligence. I mean, I think that's at every position. I think in hindsight, been a part of it where, hey, you think you're set at this position, and you passed up on some good players. So I think every year that's your charge, is to make sure you know this draft. And obviously that's the one thing about the NFL. It's not like recruiting where you can take 25 really top end players that that are all first rounders. I mean, you've got to do your due diligence and make sure you get the right fit for you. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's every year. We certainly have guys. You can find players, and you can't skip steps because there's really good players that come out of that are undrafted every year, and it's always an open competition. And obviously, on the surface, if you invest in a first early round pick, what the salary cap structure is right there. But if a guy's a better player that's an undrafted, he's going to play for us.
You get that offer that you can't refuse from Matt Ryan. Do you feel comfortable going for opportunities less than quarterback given the situation with your playmakers?
Excuse me, I couldn't really hear you.
I said if you get that offer that you can't refuse regarding Matt Ryan and end up moving him somewhere else, just speaking hypothetically, do you really feel comfortable with somebody less proven given the state of your receiver position and everything else offensively?
Depends what the offer is. I mean, like I said, it's like the old Don Corleone. Like, if they give you an offer you can't refuse, I think you got to take it. But that's with every player. I'm sure that somebody, ask Terry, if somebody wanted to give a bag of balls for me, he may push me out the door. So. That's it. All right. Thank y'all.